Welcome back to another episode of Moms Moving On. I can't believe this is our third time welcoming Bill Eddy onto the podcast. If you know me, you know how much I value Bill and his information. He is an expert in all things high conflict, the co-founder of the High Conflict Institute, author of many, many books, many of which I've probably recommended to you if you have worked with me or follow me. But today we're going to be taking things in a different direction, although maybe not that different. We're talking about adult bullies. Bill Eddy is an attorney, therapist, mediator, and the chief innovation officer of the High Conflict Institute, and he has spent his career helping people fight adult bullies, otherwise known as maybe your high conflict ex. I don't know. We'll dig right into it. Bill, thank you so much for being back with us.
Thank you, Michelle. Thanks for having me back again. It's always good talking with
The
you.
door is always open for you. Okay, so you have a new book out, Our New World of Adult Bullies: How to Spot Them, How to Stop Them. And this is really interesting to me because I think many parents like myself, not only do we not want our young children to be bullied, we also don't want them to be the bullies. So I think it's really interesting that we're talking about this because there are so many adults in all of our lives that we can look at and think, wow, how are they still bullying people even at our age?
Yeah. So, what it seems to be, I really think it's personality based because 90% of child bullies don't become adult bullies. They kind of experiment with it as they're developing and go, oops, that didn't work. I got punched in the face, or my friends don't want me anymore as a friend, and it just doesn't work to be a bully. But maybe 5 to 10% of people continue on, and maybe they've been reinforced for being a bully. Maybe uh, it's become part of their personality, and maybe they have some success because of it. Maybe they've conned people and made some big money that way. So we see them in all walks of life, all occupations, all communities have some adult bullies. And what's interesting about the book and writing it now is that bullies used to be kept on the fringes, but in today's world, we're giving them a lot of attention because they're interesting and exciting to watch. But let me tell you, and I'm sure your listeners know, it's not something you want to live with.
It is definitely not something you want to live with, especially after you've taken the steps to separate yourself from said bully. Now you may have to raise kids with them and still find yourself getting bullied. But let's take it back to the kids for 1 second. So you say most kids can grow out of this bullying mindset once they realize that it doesn't make them the favorite on the playground. How can parents spot whether or not their child is engaging in bullying behavior, and what can they do to help them grow out of that?
Well, it's natural for kids to experiment with aggressive behavior. And so if you see your child being unduly aggressive with siblings, with friends, with other kids at school, is talk about how that doesn't work in the long run. You know, you're not going to have friends if you're too aggressive. And so you got to ease up on that and find other ways to communicate. You say, well, I was angry because of what he did. Well, using words, you know, would teach kids from the early stages that you need to use words to deal with that. Um, and or if you see your child becoming kind of passive or withdrawn, they may be getting bullied and fear talking about it. So one of the biggest things is talking about it. And it's important, I think, for parents to say, we need to talk about it. We're not going to avoid this. We need to talk about it. Johnny doesn't want to talk about it. Say, we need to talk, Johnny, because if you're being bullied, for example, that's something that's not your fault. Nobody should be bullied. So just kind of getting some conversations going, watching for behavior that's too aggressive or too passive. That's the
Mhm.
main thing.
Something I've tried to do with my own daughter. She's an only child, and so I don't get to really see her interaction with other kids her age. But when she does come home to me and complain about someone mistreating her, somebody maybe said something that hurt her feelings, I always take the route of, you talk about the ear statements for calming upset people. We always back things up to the empathy piece. So, how might have Susie been feeling that day when she said that horrible thing to you? Oh, well, she actually came in crying and she was upset because her mom forgot to pack her lunch. Oh, okay. How would that make you feel? If I, so we take it back to that empathy piece, but I also don't want to be in a position of excusing poor behavior, and this will segue into adult behavior, but what would be the tip there so that our children don't think, okay, well, if you had a bad day, you can go mistreat somebody and they'll have empathy for you.
Right, right. Well, I always recommend the assertive approach. In other words, don't be too aggressive and don't be too passive. Be assertive. So if somebody's treating you badly, is say, cut it out. I don't like that. Instead of shrinking away or screaming and throwing something at the
Hmm.
person,
Hmm.
is the assertive approach. And I think from an early age, kids can kind of get that. You don't try to hurt the other person, but you don't let them hurt you. And
Hmm.
the way to do that is just mostly through some short statements that say, I don't agree with you. You say, I'm stupid. I don't agree with you. Or cut it out, or that's enough. Just a short phrase often will stop bullies because they're looking for people who are going to tolerate them. And
Hmm.
if you don't have to have a big fight and argument. You just say, hey, cut it out. That's enough. Give me a
Yep.
break. Give me a
Yep.
break is actually a good one because it's kind of humorous. It's like, give me a break.
Yeah. Yeah. And really, I mean, I think it's such a fine line with trying to empower our children and telling them how great and wonderful and capable they are, and also not wanting to unintentionally raise a child who is a bully or a narcissist. So how might we unintentionally do this? Because I can't tell you how many clients I work with who will tell me that they feel the poor behavior of their ex-spouse has been enabled by a parent, particularly a mother.
Yeah. So I think again, it's the assertive approach, giving them a sense of confidence, and not allowing extreme behaviors. And the things that the mistake I think that many people in our culture made starting like 50 years ago was to try to boost children's self-esteem by saying you're wonderful, you can do anything, be anything, have anything, you're special, and then ending the sentence there. And instead, what they should be saying is, you can have a lot if you work real hard. You can do a lot. You can learn a lot. You've got to put a lot of energy in. You have to have empathy for other people and respect them and understand what's important to them to really get along and make long-term friends. And so the message that you can get everything you want without doing anything, that's the narcissistic message. And
Right.
also that you're special. And it's interesting, a lot of young adults grew up being told they were special. And I remember once uh, at a dinner table with some friends, and they're like 21, 22, 23-year olds. They said, did we raise you to be special? Do you think you're special? And I said, oh, yeah, we're special. The message is you're not special to the world. You're going to have to work. You're going to have to
Hmm.
compete, but you're
Hmm.
special to me. That's
Hmm.
the message.
There's room for both. I see like everything on social media is so polarizing. It's one or the other. It's either gentle parenting or discipline, or, there's never room for the both ands, which I think is so
Yeah.
important. You can both praise your children and also be clear on the fact that the world doesn't revolve around them.
It's finding balance. I think over and over in all of this stuff, it's really finding balance. There's no pure single way to be. It's finding balance, like you said,
Hmm.
between both ends.
Yeah,
Um,
well, that's such a great tool, I think, for parents in all areas of parenting, right? Like any extreme is never going to be good.
Exactly, exactly. And that's where the high conflict stuff we teach about comes in. It's like people want to solve that. Like, let's just eliminate all the high conflict people. That's not the answer either.
Right.
They have a lot to offer, but you can be assertive and set limits. It's setting limits, which is a big theme in the Bullies book, is we have to set limits and have consequences when necessary because they don't stop themselves, but they still have a lot to offer.
Hmm. Hmm. When you say they have a lot to offer, what do you mean by that?
Well, I think that, bullies have show up in every occupation, and some of them can be really skilled in their occupation. My favorite example of a bully who had a lot to offer was Steve Jobs, who was the
Mm.
driving force behind iPhones and iPads and all of that. He had a terrible reputation for being a bully in Silicon Valley. He'd yell at people, he'd threaten to fire like 200 people because their division was running late. He'd burst into tears during meetings. He was a very emotional and impulsive person on the one hand, but he also had a lot to offer. And the reason he succeeded is the management team around him was able to manage him. And they say, "Hey, Steve, let's go for a walk now. We need to go for a
Wow,
walk now." They go for a walk and he'd calm down and then he wouldn't fire 200 people,
that's
things like
amazing.
that.
Well, unfortunately, for the majority of people who are getting divorced from somebody that is making their life very difficult, there is no management team. So
Yes.
if we turn this conversation towards people who feel that they are being bullied by an ex-spouse or soon to be ex-spouse, what is there that we can do about that? And how are these bullies unintentionally alienating their children from the other parent?
Well, let's actually start there because that's a huge topic. I just gave a presentation at an international conference to over 100 people on the alienating the child issue. And it's commonly part of bullies that they alienate their kids against the other parent because they, first of all, lack a lot of self-awareness. They do stuff because it's part of their personality, not because they think, oh, I'm going to alienate my child against the other parent.
Absolutely. Yep.
So what they do, though, I believe a lot of it is the emotions. So they share their intense emotions about the other parent, their anger, their sadness, their fears. And the children don't have the mechanism to not absorb emotions. What people don't realize is children learn really first from their parents emotionally. First couple of
Hmm.
years of life, kids don't know how to respond to things, so they look at their parent and then they burst into tears, or they look at their parent and then they start laughing. And so they really follow their parents. And it's not till adulthood they really can avoid absorbing parent emotions, because that takes a certain amount of cognitive development to be able to say, hey, that's him, that's not me. I don't have to feel the way my dad
Uh,
feels, or I don't have
well,
to feel the way my mom feels.
still hard even in adulthood. And if you're an adult who struggles with a difficult parent, give yourself a little grace and then recognize how hard it might be for your child to have to do the same.
Yeah, exactly. But so the thing is, and we teach this in our New Ways for Families method for parents separating and divorcing, and it gets court ordered sometimes. And that is for both parents to practice making positive statements about the other parent, even when you don't want to, is from time to time, you need to say positive statements because when people are alienating their kids against the other parent, they say zero positive about the other parent. The child gets this pure like laser dose of negativity and slowly absorbs that. And it's I what's interesting, there's a concept I put in the book, and I don't know whether it's too complicated for people, but I think that going through divorce, the concept is the idea of forming an anti-community, that they bond with the child against the other parent. And so
Hmm.
we're united and we're really close and we have an intense bond, but it's a negative bond because it's a bond against
Against.
somebody else.
Yep.
And we see that, I mean, we see that in politics, we see that in community relations, but we see that in families too. And that's something to really work hard to not do. And the way to not do that is to say positive things about the other parent. And if you say something that's intensely negative about the other parent, is make a repairing statement. Say,
Yes.
Johnny, I just said, your father is such a jerk. And I really, that's not what I mean for you to know. I value your relationship with him, and he has a lot to offer you, and so that's not the way I really think, and that's not what I meant to say. And adults do that all the time with their friends, but when a parent's purely negative about the other parent, the children can't. It's hard to recover. And to me, and in writing this book, is bullies mostly are not aware of what they're doing. And
Yeah.
we don't think that. We think they're doing it all on purpose, but they're really not that aware, and they're kind of stumbling through life, losing friends, making mistakes, creating trouble, but not aware. So we have to realize, and I like what you said earlier about empathy,
Hmm.
is have empathy for them, but we still have to set limits and impose consequences. That's what we
Right.
do need to do.
Empathy, not sympathy. They're two very different
Yeah,
things. And if you're not clear on the difference, please look that up before you start sympathizing with your high conflict ex. But have empathy for the fact that, like Bill said, certain behaviors, people don't wake up and choose to be awful. They just sometimes don't know a better way. But I want to go back to unintentionally alienating the children from the other parent. I, till I'm blue in the face, have been preaching on social media. That's a whole platform for my account, supporting your child's relationship with the other parent, despite your feelings for them, regardless of whether they cheated on you, deceived you, broke your heart, whatever, because one has nothing to do with parenting in most cases. But there's always the argument, but shouldn't I be honest with my child? Don't I owe my child the truth? Shouldn't they know about their other parent? And at that point, I feel I can't argue with this because this person is so intent on sticking with their feelings and how angry they are that they can't see the benefit of shutting it down on behalf of the child.
yeah. I think of that as brutal honesty, and the emphasis is on the word brutal.
Brutal.
Don't be brutal with your child. Brutal honesty isn't helpful for your child. That's one thing about relationships is there's stuff we say and stuff we don't say. One thing we've learned as adults is how to hold our tongue sometimes. And what's fascinating, some in researching this book, I came upon this book and research called The Archaeology of the Mind. And what they said in there is all mammals have 7 emotional systems in common, including humans. And this is like our lower mind, fear and rage and stuff like that. But what's interesting, they said, is humans are the only animal that have learned to hold their tongue,
Hmm.
and that makes us so much more successful, and that teaching your child when to hold their tongue by demonstrating when to hold your tongue is so important. And bad mouthing the other parent is not being honest, being brutal. And that's the thing. I just say, don't be brutally honest. Don't lie to your child, but you don't have to be brutally honest to raise them.
So if we have a parent who is engaging in that behavior, who does parentify the child and does put them in this loyalty bind and does maybe unintentionally force them to carry the weight of their emotions in the divorce, would that person be bullying their child?
I think to an extent that they're being a bully, because what they're doing in a way is trying to dominate their child. And that's the theme of bullies, is they want to dominate other people. They want to control them. They want to have them do their bidding. And most bullies don't really realize this because it's part of their personality. And
Hmm.
they may have grown up this way, thinking that this is how you get along in the world. You tell people how things are, you're brutally honest with everybody, and that's really cool. But it's really cruel. It's cruel to be brutally honest.
It
And
is.
so it's something, they're not aware of, this tendency to dominate. So I would say that's being a bully. And I think in families, there's subtle ways. I mean, domestic violence is very clear. That's bullying. But coercive control, like
Yes.
controlling the finances, controlling, seeing your relatives and friends, all of that, coercive control is also bullying because you're dominating another person.
Absolutely. And we see coercive control and co-parenting all the time. A lot of times I find it's because I think many people unknowingly and hopefully with hope expect that once they legally sign those divorce papers, everything's going to be fine and they're going to be able to move on from the other person. But it takes a lot of self awareness and years to emotionally untangle yourself from the person and break the cycles of maybe keeping the peace or allowing yourself to be coerced just to avoid conflict. And that's one of the hardest tools for people to learn. And so when a client comes to me and says this person keeps harassing me or this person keeps bullying me, I say, well, how are you allowing yourself to be bullied in this situation?
Yes, and I put 6 strategies in the book. And the first is recognizing the pattern of behavior you're dealing with. But the second is pull the plug on the
Mm.
bully. And
Mm-hmm.
pulling the plug on the bully means not helping the bully in bullying, like not keeping it a secret, not reacting, those kinds of things. So pull the plug on the bully. Also realize the bully may have a personality pattern of behavior and they just may never change, but you can change how you interact with them. And that's the important piece. Control what you can control because they may not be able to stop themselves.
They may not be. Is it possible that in controlling what you can control and not showing up the same way to the proverbial battle that the bully wants to engage us in, can that change the way they show up for us, do you think? Because it certainly won't change the other person.
It doesn't change their personality, but it can change their interaction with you. And a good example is our B.I.F.F method of emails, brief, informative,
Mhm.
friendly, and firm. And I'm getting more and more feedback because we've been teaching it like for 15 years now.
I teach it on your behalf too. It's the
Yay!
best. Biff and ear. That's how we survive co-parenting over here.
That's it. Yes. So what's happening is that people are writing that way to a hostile ex, and that hostile ex writes back, you're an idiot, blah 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 blah, and they're writing in the form of a biff. After a while, the hostile ex starts writing back in the biff format, but they don't know that it's a format, and they start seeing that you're consistent and
Hmm.
persistent with it, and that it looks better too.
Yep.
And so what we see is you can influence them by what you communicate. And so just keep responding this way. And a lot of times they run out of steam because also they don't get the joy of fighting with you.
Right.
So,
Well,
yeah.
like it says, there's a video on your website that I share all the time in my trainings and with my clients and with my coaches, where the female says her Biff emails were like throwing cold water on the fire. And it really works. But I want to say that in my experience, it's the ear statements that really work best with a highly emotional, ego driven, angry ex. There is nothing better than them hearing something empathetic, feel that they're getting your attention, and then a little bit of respect as like the icing on the cake. When we show up with the, hey, I see you're really upset about this. I totally get it. I would be upset too if I were in your situation, is way different than what are you complaining about again, asshole? Because there's such a big difference psychologically for the person receiving the message.
Totally different. And I think the difference is like this archaeology of the mind, that the hostility is speaking to the lower mind, the more
Hmm.
primitive part of ourselves.
Hmm.
And empathy, attention, and respect really speaks to a neutrality that way, but also that we can connect. And it's a positive connection. And people don't realize how powerful the words are that we use.
And how
And
powerful the psychology behind taking the high road with the
yeah,
people who we feel deserve it the least, and how much that can create a connection that we didn't know this person really needed.
absolutely. I remember when I was representing clients in court that there were certain lawyers that everybody knew was an a-hole.
Hmm.
And what happened is I'd be in situations where I had to have a discussion with them, and I'd try giving them empathy, attention, respect, and they would calm down.
Hmm.
And they didn't change their personalities. They didn't become easy to deal with, but
Mm-hmm.
they became easier to deal with. And if high conflict lawyers you can impact, then certainly, we should be able to impact each other and former spouses and partners.
Yeah.
So it's really what you do influences what they do, at least
Yes.
in the moment.
And really set such a great example for your children. My daughter has asked me in the past why I'm still kind to people who have treated me badly. And I love when she brings this up. Like, for example, we were in Starbucks recently, and the person behind the counter was really nasty. Like, you could tell this person was having a bad day. And right away in my head, I'm like, God, what could have happened to her this morning? Maybe she got a flat tire. Maybe her boyfriend broke up with her. And while she was hastily, she asked me to repeat my order and she wasn't nice. My daughter was standing there and I said, Hey, are you okay? Do you need a minute? Because I can wait for the next. And I wasn't being patronizing. I really like, I knew that person. And she was like, Thank you. And she just started crying and walked away. And so my daughter was like, Why were you nice to her? She was so mean. I said, She wasn't mean. I said, Something was really upsetting her and it was coming out sideways. And I used the example of when she has a bad day at school and she just wants to slam the door in my face. It's not about me, it's about
Yeah.
her. And I think it set such a great example for our children. So for anyone wondering, why they should withhold certain things from their children or why the children shouldn't know the truth about the other parent is because you want to set the example of not every not every bad behavior that someone else engages in has to do with us, and it doesn't have to define who they are as people.
Yeah. Well, I like that you said the one that's not about me. That's one of my favorite encouraging
Books, yeah.
statements. It's not about me. And it makes it so much easier not to engage in just doing bullying back, but
Mm-hmm.
just to go, okay, a deep breath here. And now here's what I'd like to say, rather than reacting to that.
Yep.
And the message I give people a lot is we tend to overreact or underreact to bullies. And so if you overreact, you may have had a simple situation like you just described and made it worse. Um, but also underreacting, letting bullies bully us, that's not wise either. But by connecting like E.A.R
Mm-hmm.
statements, it just it's human and it's part of who we are and part of how we've succeeded to survive this long is
It's the
we have
hug.
empathy.
Yeah, it's the hug. Like all bullies, I always tell Bella, bullies in school they have stuff going on that they don't know how to manage and control. And bullies need love too. Bullies need hugs, and I think it's the same with adults. And it really goes back to everything you've written about already. Um, the empathy, attention, the respect, the managing the high conflict person in your life. It requires a level of respect because on some level they feel they're not getting that.
Right. And they may not be getting it anywhere. And so if you give it to them, they like melt in your hands sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it always surprises people because we do in our trainings, we teach professionals to do ear statements and and in pairs and they practice in pairs and they say, I really felt myself calming down. And it's just so kind of it's our higher human mind gets it that we can get along, we can work together, and actually there's some good in everybody, but you still have to be able to set limits and impose consequences to protect
Absolutely.
yourself from time to time. Yeah.
Absolutely. I want to turn the conversation a little bit to social media.
Yeah.
Social media has become like fair game for anyone who wants to bully somebody else, and then it becomes like a gang attack on the person, the victim of the day who we're going to bully, and then everyone, this is where cancel culture comes into play. And basically, if you say one wrong thing on social media, the world is out to get you, and they feel entitled to do so from their little keyboards. How do you think social media has really encouraged this world of bullying?
I think in two ways. The first way is, yes, that people don't restrain themselves. And so they say awful things and get away with it. There's no consequence, and you think about if somebody's standing right there and you say that there are all these nasty things, there's a good chance they're going to take a swing at you or they're going to, unplug your computer or they're going to do something that's negative. Whereas online, you never feel the negativity. So we have unrestrained behavior online. And I
Mm-hmm.
like to point out that social media lacks a conscience. In other words, relationships have a conscience. I'm careful not to say certain things to you because I don't want to hurt you. I have a
Mm-hmm.
conscience. Hopefully, you're careful not to say certain things to me because you don't want to hurt me. We want to support our relationship. So relationships need rules and boundaries and a conscience. Social media itself doesn't have a conscience. It's not built that way. And so what it does is it reinforces bullies. And antisocial bullies don't have a conscience. Narcissistic bullies don't have empathy. And borderline bullies lack emotional self control. And so it encourages all of this. And that's why social media, I think, becomes dominated by bullies and aggressive behavior. So its tolerance for that is one of the problems. The other problem that I didn't realize until I was working on the book is that social media is serving as a support group for bullies, that
Mm-hmm.
bullies are finding each other. And they even found, and this shocked me, school shooters and mass shooters and supermarkets and stuff like that, that we think are lone individuals. They were on social media. They have people that encourage them. They have people they're trying to impress. Even a murder suicide will impress them with how you went out, fighting the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so people that used to be isolated, sitting alone at home, going, I better be good or I won't have friends. Now I don't have to be good because I found friends that are like me, and
Mm-hmm.
we're into bullying other people. And my concern is that we're developing like gangs on the internet,
Oh yeah, we
and,
are.
and that it's going to get worse and worse. And it's totally inadvertent. And we have to find ways to set limits on that.
Absolutely. I think I experienced my first real um adult bully situation on Instagram, a group, one of those group chats that I was added to with the intent of everybody in the group chat attacking me. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, I'm so upset about it. And then I'm looking around like I'm an almost 40-year-old woman, letting strangers I don't know upset me this much. How can we help our children who don't have the understanding of it's not me, it's them, to not fall into these traps? It's such a scary world on there right now.
Yeah, I think, and we're not going to stop the world. So we have to teach skills and teach
Hmm.
the kids skills to manage and not internalize this stuff and know that they can put it down. And I'm for one, I'm a supporter of the idea of no phones during high school, during the day, take them away and give them back because you have to be able to stop the flow of negativity. And while you're developing, the child's brain isn't fully developed till about 25. And a lot of adolescence is figuring out what's a crisis and what's not a crisis.
Hmm.
And you have to have time to reflect, to think about that and sort out. My girlfriend didn't call me back yesterday. It's the end of the world. And you
Hmm.
go, no, wait, it isn't the end of the world. There's this other girl that expressed interest,
Uh-huh.
and I can solve this somehow. But we have to give kids skills and limit what we can. I mean, this is what communities used to do,
Right.
is protect people from bullies and say, everybody, hey, watch out for him, he's a bully. But now the bullies are the community and they're saying, hey, let's pick on her.
Ugh, it's so
And
bad.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. And we're doing it to ourselves as a culture. And my belief is that we haven't found the balance at all yet, but that we're going to have to find the balance to survive, because you can't
Absolutely.
just have, we're like returning to the cave kind of thing where the most aggressive person wins. And that's not how society's built. Society's built on the most cooperative people tend to be the smartest people and the most successful. And we've got to find this balance. And it's not easy. And I empathize with parents with young children
Ugh,
because
it's
you
so
don't want
hard.
your you don't want your child to be left out. I grew up without a television in the 1950s and 60s, And that was the golden age of television. Everybody had television, and my family didn't. And I really resented it until I was about 30. And then I said, my parents were brilliant that way
Mhm. Yep.
because I didn't see 10,000 murders by the time I finished high school and all this other stuff. So we can and should impose some controls, but mostly teach kids how not to absorb it.
Yep. And as adults, we need to be armed and ready to not absorb it, which is why we're so grateful that this book is out in the world. Bill's new book, Our New World of Adult Bullies: How to Spot Them, How to Stop Them, a must read for anybody who not only struggles with the adult bully in their life, but who also wants to set the right example for their children, knowing that children eventually will face a bully or two in their time. So, Bill has a number of ways you can learn from him and with him. His podcast called It's All Your Fault, which I think is hilarious. If you know his books, you would understand why that is the title. But the podcast is available everywhere and to anyone. And I highly recommend checking it out, especially if you need help dealing with the difficult person in your life. Bill, you mentioned also you are doing some workshops.
Yeah, kind of workshops. So we do 4 1-hour session in September. It's bullies in the family. October is bullies in the workplace. November, bullies in communities. And so we're going to go more in depth on that and the nature of bullying, and also what to do to help yourself cope with that. And a lot of it's for professionals, so what they can do to help clients cope with that.
Mhm. I also want to recommend to anybody who is first being introduced to Bill in this episode, we have a few other episodes with Bill, primarily talking about um, managing the people in your life who may have a personality disorder. Maybe you're dealing with a narcissistic ex or somebody who is just intent on conflict at every turn. Really great books by Bill that I recommend to all read, all clients, all listeners. First and foremost is Don't Alienate the Kids. I think that is the blueprint for co-parenting right there. Even if you don't think you're engaging in certain behaviors, like we discussed on this podcast, you might unintentionally be making the faces that you're, curbing your mouth for. So let's all educate ourselves on how to best lead by example in co-parenting. Check out all of Bill's offerings at the highconflictinstitute.com, which will be linked here. Bill, anything else before we go?
Just that, give people hope and encouragement. I think with knowledge and skills, people can do well. They can raise their kids well. They can manage their own lives and succeed, and also contribute to a world that doesn't have to be dominated by bullies. So
No.
I'm
Which
hopeful.
reminds me, one other thing that we love from Bill's website, from the High Conflict Institute, are 4 big skills for children, critical thinking skills to teach our kids when they themselves are in the throes of managing difficult personalities and maybe even a difficult parent. So you might want to check that out too, and we will link it. Thank you, Bill, for being here. And to everyone listening, we'll see you next time on Mom's Moving On.
Thanks so much, Michelle.
Thank you.